Dr. Vishal Guleria, Honorable Vice Chancellor. I think she has left, but her presence made all the difference. And my apologies to all the, both the attendees and all the eminent dignitaries who are present here, because there was an extraordinary state government meeting, because our state, Madhya Pradesh, is going to celebrate its 66th Foundation Day, day after tomorrow, and the state government had convened an emergency meeting for which I had to go. So I requested my former colleague, Dr. Mamta Rana. One thing that Dr. Guleria missed in was a short but very memorable tenure at the University of Petroleum and Energy Studies, where I was in Dehradun, and we established this School of Modern Media there, and that was again one of my old connections with Uttarakhand. Always a pleasure to be at Uttarakhand. And then Professor A.K. Pandey, Professor A. Borai, and as I said, my former colleague, Dr. Mamta Rana. And thank you, Dr. Vishal, for that warm introduction. Esteemed heads of department, faculty members, and PhD scholars and dear students. Greetings from Asia's first journalism university and India's largest journalism university, and the beautiful lake city of Bhopal. Now, you have given me a very important topic, and that's media and law. I think that this is an area where a lot of scope is still there for research and detailed study. And I'm glad that your department, your School of Law, took the initiative of organizing this webinar. And I'm sure that this is the beginning of a long interaction, not just with me, but also with media education, mass communication, because I believe that it's important that we have exchanges between law and media faculties, because we teach law as a part of our curriculum. Of course, these are called media laws. Every journalist is expected to be aware of laws pertaining to media as part of his or her curriculum, right from the UG level to PG. Because one, as the Honorable Vice Chancellor also put it, and Dr. Pandey also put it, you see, we both constitute two important pillars of democracy. Apart from executive and legislature, judiciary is the third pillar, and we are the fourth pillar. So obviously judiciary encompasses the entire legal fraternity and not just the judges. So there is a very close relationship. In fact, long time back, when I was a correspondent with the Press Trust of India, I used to cover the courts extensively, right from the district courts to the Delhi High Court to even the Supreme Court. That was when Supreme Court subsequently came with accreditation rules, wherein you can get to cover the apex court only if you are a law graduate. So why I am mentioning this is because many of you who are doing right now graduation in law can also subsequently look forward to a career in journalism. In many institutions, media institutions across the country, today law reporting or legal reporting is handled by law graduates. In the same way that today you have legal advisors in almost every university or in every institution with a legal background. So that way also, for the law students, here is a job opportunity, not just as a legal advisor in a media company, but also as somebody who can be the legal correspondent because today every good media house is looking for, like for example, the place where I worked, we had a full-fledged legal bureau at the PTI, the Press Trust of India, which is India's largest news agency, where right from the bureau chief to every correspondent covering the smallest courts to high court, everybody had a law degree. They came with LLB and some with other, higher level of degrees. So it's a very, very, close symbiotic relationship, I would say, between law and media. Law is taught in every media college. But as I said, we don't study it in entirety. We study the relevant sections because I am one of those who have taught media law, in different universities. And media laws include those pertaining to coverage of courts, laws pertaining to contempt of court, laws pertaining to Indian Penal Code, IPC, sections of IPC and sections of CRPC, which are relevant to the media profession. For example, we do tell them about the various laws governing defamation, libel, slander. And now why are we teaching law to media students? It's because it's very important that law students, media students, when they go out and become media practitioners, become journalists, they should be aware of the law of the land, because when they write or when they speak for television or radio stations, when they write for newspapers or digital media, they should not violate the law of the land. So every journalist is trained. Now I'm sure that some of you may be asking that, well, many of them don't follow. Now that's an issue, I will deal with it later. But let me assure you, for those who are not aware, that in media schools, we have teachers who are identified for teaching media law, and for telling them to be aware of the pitfalls of making a mistake, of violating the law of the land and landing themselves in problems. That is why we have a very strong editorial filtration process in newspapers, in news agencies, and even in television channels, unlike the social media. I'm sure all of you know the difference between social and digital media and the traditional media, which is the print and electronic, where we have a very strong filtration process. That is why in this age of infodemic, where there is an overdose of information, you say that the newspapers are still credible. Why are they credible? The newspapers are still considered credible because of the simple reason that we have a strong filtration process, a strong editorial process, where anything and everything doesn't just go like that, the way it is reported. Everything is weighed. The sub-editors, the senior sub-editors, the chief sub-editors, the news editors go through each and every sentence, each and every word to ensure that the law of the land is not violated, that there is no defiance of the law, there is no contempt of the law. Now that is the rule. But yes, of late there have been sensationalism. There have been issues like trial by media, about which the general public is also concerned. Now I'll give you some reasons for that, because today when I'm talking about media law and when Dr. Mamta Rana invited me, I said that let me have a freewheeling discussion rather than restricting myself to a couple of provisions of the law. Let me, because these are law students, and let me have a 360-degree view of the entire process of media and law. How do they interact? Where do the aberrations take place? Why do they take place? We need to understand this. So to that extent, this is more in the mode of understanding the concepts rather than a theory-based lecture. Now, what I wanted to highlight here is that let us briefly understand the working of media. You see, media started off as a mission in this country, led by the freedom fighters, people like Lokmanya Balagangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, Netaji Bose, Mahatma Gandhi. They all launched newspapers. In fact, they say that Gandhiji was a barrister at law, but if you ask me, he was more a practicing journalist. Gandhiji he used the power of media, of newspapers, right from Indian Opinion when he was in South Africa to newspapers like Harijan, back home, Young India, to carry forward his movement of creating awareness in the country, of enlightening the society about the social evils, including untouchability, and creating a movement against the foreign yoke. He utilized it as a weapon, but he followed certain principles scrupulously. His objective was not to create a market. His objective was not to sell a product. His objective was to create. So that is why we call it mission journalism, wherein the objective was, there are certain lofty objectives, lofty ideals which had to be achieved. But over a period of time, the small newspapers were replaced by the huge corporate setups, which initially started these newspapers, some of them, like for example the Hindustan Times. You would be surprised to know was started by Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, who established the Banaras Hindu University. He felt that we should have an English newspaper also, because majority of the English newspapers were supporting the British. So he felt that there should be a nationalist Indian newspaper also, which should be taking up the cause of the Indian freedom struggle. Now, majority of the papers started off, as I said, on a mission mode, but over a period of time, they got into the hands of the corporates, and then from mission, we saw they're getting into a professional mode where the objective was to make profits. Some of them were floated because you required a facade. You required a media arm to ensure that you are not criticized, you are not attacked by the governments of the day, by the other newspapers. So you started your own newspaper. So newspapers became an extension of the corporate interests. Then came the sad phase of journalism, wherein you saw aberrations like the Radia tapes, where you had journalists who were currying favor for people to be made ministers in the Union Council of Ministers. That was the level at which things were being worked out. You heard about things like paid news. You heard about things which were having huge dimensions, so much so that the election commission itself took cognizance of that, and the election commission decided to have observers in every election, to oversee every election, to see whether there are paid news, in the newspapers, which are not being shown as election expenses of the candidate. So to bring about more transparency in the election process, this was required, because huge amounts were being spent on paid news. Now, who is responsible? Are the common journalists responsible? I would say no. The common journalist, by and large, there may be aberrations. Some celebrity journalist or somebody having a certain taking a certain, I would say, interest in promoting somebody. But by and large, the journalists are working for the different corporates, and the corporates are promoting their own interests. So the journalist indirectly is promoting the interests of his or her employee. So you may think that, oh, this journalist is pro and this journalist is anti. But there is nothing like that. They are supposed to follow the editorial line of the newspaper. So every newspaper or every media house has an editorial line. It may be pro-establishment, it may be anti-establishment, it may be, a neutral stand, which is rare. Because it's a hugely polarized scenario today, where you are either pro or anti. There is hardly any space for neutrality. So that is the situation. Now, in this kind of a situation, where does the law come into place? This is something, because that is the topic of the today's lecture. You see, particularly with regard to, we are supposed to be on the right from the word go. If I have to print a newspaper, I have to follow the law. I need to be a registered newspaper under the Press and Registration of Books Act, PRB Act. I have to be registered with the Registrar of Newspapers of India. Under the PRB Act, I have to designate an editor for that purpose. I have to obtain, if I want to have a channel, I have to obtain the necessary licenses from both the Information Broadcasting Ministry and the IT Ministry. Only then and then can I, start a newspaper or a television channel. Now, is there a regulatory mechanism? No. If you look at the history of Indian media, the Indian media prior to independence has suffered a lot under the British. So right from the Rowlatt Act to you name it, the Indian press has been, every effort has been made to, or the Vernacular Press Act, every effort has been made to muzzle the Indian media by the British. Nationalist voices were suppressed. And they never allowed nationalist, yet the language media played a very important role in creating awareness across the country about the freedom struggle. Many journalists suffered a lot. We had journalists like Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi, journalists like Pandit Makhanlal Chaturvedi, after whom our own university is named. He wrote, if you remember, this year we are celebrating 100 years of Pushpa Ki Abhilasha. Pushpa Ki Abhilasha is something you and I studied right in the school textbooks. Now, this was written by somebody who was a hardcore journalist, that is Pandit Makhanlal Chaturvedi. He started, his entire Karma Bhumi was Khandwa in Madhya Pradesh, where he started his newspaper Karamveer. And he's a dialogue with the then British magistrate. He was not British, the magistrate was actually Irish. And that is world famous, So, I will answer, some questions are coming up, I will certainly answer. Now, please remember that so what has happened is that at that time, he said that the judge told him that what is the objective of he said that I want to raise voice against the atrocities that you are committing on the people of this country. So he said that that the law will take its course. He said that fine, I know, I am doing this knowing very well that you will act against me. And despite such strong answers, the Irish judge gave him permission to start his newspaper. He said that I admire your, courage to say this in front of me. So that was Pandit Makhanlal Chaturvedi. Now, this is the kind of brand journalism that we did in this country. Then came 1975. In 1975, you had emergency, one of the darkest phases of, press freedom in this country, where scores of journalists were put behind the bars. Police inspectors used to decide which news will go. There was a chief censor who was appointed to censor the news items. Anything anti-government was not allowed. As I said, many journalists were put behind the bars. News agencies were, 4 national news agencies were amalgamated and merged into one. You had most of the newspapers surrendered very shamelessly. At that time, you did not have electronic media. If at all it was there, it was with the government, the All India Radio and a little bit Doordarshan. They surrendered. There is a famous dialogue, famous quote by the former leader of opposition and former deputy prime minister, Mr. L.K. Advani, who had famously talked about the Indian media's situation at that time. He says in his book that when they were asked to bend, they crawled. So, some of these media houses were just asked to bend, but they crawled for their survival, and that was the new low. But there were also honorable exceptions like Ramnath Goenka, who stood up with the Indian Express, who stood up against the atrocities. He painted his front page, the lead page, fully in black too. And that is how he printed the newspaper. It was a totally black ink on the front page to express his protest. There were also such exceptions in this country who defied, and finally, the emergency ended. Then, as I said, the corporate sector came in a big way. The television changed a lot. What the television initially was, of course, started by Doordarshan. Subsequently, the private houses started playing a major role. Now that is when the deviation started. There started heavy competition between these, cutthroat competition between the television channels. And then started a very, very diabolical rat race called the TRP rat race for the television rating points, because it was the TRPs on the basis of which you will get advertisements. So there was a hugely flawed television audience measuring system wherein TAM meters were installed across the length and breadth of the country. But that was ridiculous. For a country of 1 billion plus, you had just 5,000 meters in some cities and urban centers. That hardly could measure up what was actually happening on the screen. Now this led to a TRP race where everybody started, it was like, I'm sorry to use this term. I hope there is no media person, because then they will not forgive me, even if I am a fellow media person. It was like a fish market. Everybody was shouting at the top of their voice to get attention. They were screaming. They were screaming because the remote was now with the common man. He would change. Whoever screams highest, they felt would be, would attract the viewer interest. And then they started a series of high-profile debates. They would pay, I'm sorry to say this, they would pay people to abuse each other. They would even pay some retired generals from across the border to listen to abuses from us. And then there will be abuse and cross abuse. There would be slap and cross slap on the show, live. And this kind of sensationalism marked a new low in journalism. Evening shows were converted into kangaroo courts, where they started deciding, the judge and the jury, they were all the same, and based on loose reportage, they would pronounce the guilty. They would say so and so is responsible. The crime has just happened. And we have seen cases like the Arushi Talwar case, where, the law of the land was virtually, you would say, put at stake. And it was the television channels which started deciding who is guilty. I'm sorry to say, but, and somewhere the judiciary in certain observations accepted it also, that the public pressure mounted by the media houses also served to influence certain judgments, which was not certainly in the larger interests of the society. Because our judiciary is based on the principle, our laws are based on the principles of natural justice, where we say that even if 1,000 criminals go scot-free, no innocent should be punished. That is the premises on which we follow, our judicial system. But when these media trials started happening, somewhere, some of the judicial actions were driven by the public opinion that was created, and also because it led to another phenomena which is described as judicial activism. This judicial activism was an outcome of the media trials and, driven by a craze for popularity. So, that is also something that we need to understand. Friends, there are, now you will ask me that why not, why not apply the law on the media? I am reminded of an old story. When somebody said that we should bell the cat. If you remember those childhood stories, the question was that when the rats or the mouse gathered together, because the cat was attacking, and it was attacking left, right and center, and it was eating up all the rats. So the rats had an assembly, and the rats decided that let us do one thing, let us bell the cat. Because once the cat comes, we will come to know, the bell will start ringing, we will know that he is coming. But then they all sat over, and one of them asked that, good idea, but who will bell the cat? That is the big problem. Who will bell the media? Now, will the politicians do it? No, they will not. Because they know that after 1975, the biggest issue was of censorship, which gave them a bad name. So today, even if a media house, due to its corporate interests, if it is violating corporate laws, and if there is an income tax raid on that, even that is projected as an assault on the freedom of speech and expression. So you will say, I don't want to take any names. But even if the police go and visit a media house, they will say, look, this is an attack on them. Whereas the purpose would be something different. If the enforcement directorate goes after them for FERA or FEMA violations, even then they will say this is an attack on the freedom of speech and expression. I am not saying there are some genuine issues also. The state and the media always shared an adversarial relationship. No state, no government would want, they all want a friendly government, friendly media. They don't want a very critical media. They will try every means to have a friendly media. But then I am reminded of Mr. Advani's statement that when they were asked to bend, they crawled. Due to corporate interests, because my company X wants to get this project and I have a media house Y. If I don't get the project, then I will use the media to browbeat the government. If I get the project, I will sing praises. This is the issue. Today, there are cross-media ownership, which is against the law of the land. Today, it is the same media house which is dominating the radio, the television, and the print. As a result, there is a uniformity of content, which is a threat in a pluralistic, diverse country like ours. This is something that needs to be looked at. We are a democracy where all voices should find reflection. But the media talks only about their priorities are today based entirely on the market. For them, some overflooding in Mumbai or Gurugram or in the national capital is far more important than devastating floods in Assam and Bihar. The priorities are different. One murder in a posh locality is 4-column front page news. A murder in a poor locality hardly gets any space. Now this, because today the topic is not media, but media and law, the billion-dollar question is that who will bell the cat? The common citizen is too busy, too occupied. So the best thing he does is that over a cup of tea, he will attack the media. Hey, this media is totally Godi media, this media, that media. They will give all kinds of names to media. But do they act? Do they complain? Do they write? Some say that no, this media is anti-national. But do you highlight those things? So today either you are Godi or you are anti-national, because the people are mute spectators. For an enlightened, for a vibrant democracy, you need enlightened citizenship. Similarly, for a vibrant media, you need enlightened readership, enlightened viewership, and enlightened listenership. You cannot have that typical Dilli wala attitude, Sannu ki ya Menu ki. What have I got to do with it? You have got everything to do with it. It is about you, your country, your society, your democracy. If wrong things are being reported today, thanks to social media, today you can tag, you can hashtag, you can write letters, you can flood them with facts if they are not showing facts. And that is where I would say that the social media has come as a big enabler. Media has not been highlighting many issues. Today those issues are being highlighted by the social media. The power of social media. The common man is able to reach out. He is no more dependent on the middleman. He can directly tag or tweet an ordinary, even the powerful ministers, an ordinary person can. The ministers who have acted on tweets by the common man, they have responded. Social media has given you that power today. But at the same time, social media is also being misused. There is no medium which cannot be misused. But do we mean that we junk it? No. Let us not throw the baby with the water. The problem is the water, throw the water out of the tub. Don't throw the baby with it. The problem is not with the media, social media. The problem is with the users. The problem is with the mindset. The problem is with the thinking. Can't the same social media be utilized to bring about social changes? To create the concept of a Swachh Bharat, to make our roads and cities safe for our girl child, to ensure that we promote education. The same power of media can be utilized to create awareness for a better democracy, for an enlightened democracy. Now, these are issues which we need to ponder over as a society. So far as the law is concerned, if there is a blatant violation of law, we need to highlight that. Who will talk about it? Through the social media, law students can talk about it. Law students can say that this photograph is obscene and is violative of so and so act. This article or this program shown on television, wherein you will have some babas coming and talking about some recipes, you can say this comes under the Magical Remedies Act, and this is in violation of that. The common man is not aware of these laws. The only solution some people have is that let us go to the Press Council of India and complain. But is that a solution? The Press Council is often referred to as the toothless tiger. Though it is a Kasai judicial body, it can only at the most admonish or censure or reprimand. That's all it can do. It cannot take action. So this is high time that and this is only confined to print media. There is no such body for electronic or digital media. This was conceived as a result of the Second Press Commission. Now this is high time when we create a Media Council of India, give it more powers, empower it, make it a tiger with teeth, so that it can not only bark but it can also bite, so that it can cancel the licenses of newspapers, permission to journalists, like you have the Bar Council of India which can suspend your license. Similarly, there should be provision to suspend the license of journalists. Journalists should be issued licenses to practice. There should be a Media Council of India to do that job. Today, anybody and everybody, in Delhi the joke is that anybody who does even istri, writes press, वो भी press कर रहा है. Everybody will. I have people friends who are otherwise doing job in the corporate sector. They will come and tell me, Arey, can't you get me a press sticker? I say, why? Why do you need a press sticker? You have nothing to do with the press. So they say that No, 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 no. I can, if I commit some violation, the traffic police will not bother me, So press has become, in the mind of the perception, popular perception, some kind of an immunity against the law. Rather, the press person should be the most law-abiding person. Once what happened, my car jumped the red light, my driver, by mistake. So the traffic policeman stopped the car. So my driver went out and said, do you know who is Saab? In his typical way. Drivers are more, arrogant than the Saab, So he went and said that, do you know, my Saab is a big journalist. So the traffic police wala said, okay, your Saab may be a big journalist, but then he should be more responsible about the law. What a correct assessment. Then of course I came out of the car and paid the penalty for his mistake and apologized to the officer. But what I wanted to say is that the press sticker or press has become some kind of a diplomatic immunity of getting exemption from violations. Rather, press should be not only be the implementer of the law, but also facilitate, promote implementation of law. I think that press has a very important role with regard to law. You have very important laws like right to information, right to education, the fundamental rights of the people of this country. And the press has a very important role in creating awareness among the people, not just about their rights, but also about their duties. Constitution also enjoins you to follow duties, fundamental duties. But we hardly talk about duties. We only talk about rights. We have become a right-centric society. John F. Kennedy had famously said that ask not what your country can give you, ask what you can do for your country. It is high time that we too, in the media, create an awareness not just about rights but also about your duties. It is important that the media should highlight crimes happening in the society. I am totally for it. Don't suppress it. Highlight it. But also give equal coverage, if not more, to punishment that is being given by court after court, day in and day out. Otherwise, a wrong message is going in the society that in this society only crime is taking place, no justice is taking place. This perception has to go. Every day in every court across the country, people are being sentenced, people are being punished, people are being penalized, but we hardly come across any news item about that unless there is a death sentence once in a while. Otherwise, we think that only crimes are happening every day. And there is a big perception among